When you decide to let go, the universe always responds. This way, there comes a moment in every soul's journey when the burden of holding on becomes heavier than the fear of letting go. You cling to people, dreams, and outcomes, believing that without them, you will lose your sense of meaning. Yet, it is this very attachment that distorts your perception of life. The mind insists that control is safety, that certainty is peace. But the truth hides in the silence beyond control, where letting go becomes the beginning of true understanding. Letting go is not the abandonment of life's responsibilities, it is the release of illusion, the illusion that you are the master of the forces that shape your existence. When you release the grip of your expectations, you awaken to a deeper order, one that has been moving beneath the surface all along. It is a paradox. When you stop trying to control, life begins to move effortlessly in your favor. The universe, or rather, the unseen intelligence behind all things, does not respond to force. It responds to alignment, and alignment only occurs in surrender. The moment you truly let go, the energy that was once bound in anxiety and resistance is freed. You begin to notice subtle shifts, a conversation that arrives at the right time, a door that opens unexpectedly, a sense of peace that was never there before. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of your inner transformation made visible in the outer world. To let go is to trust that life has a rhythm beyond your comprehension. When you stop imposing your will on every moment, you allow life to express its will through you. What once seemed random begins to reveal meaning. What once felt empty begins to feel alive. You realize that the universe has always been listening, not to your words, but to your state of being. In that surrender, something within you is reborn. The mask you've worn of control, fear, ambition fall away. You begin to recognize yourself not as a fragment struggling against life, but as a part of life's unfolding itself. The battle between what is and what should be fades, replaced by an awareness that everything unfolds precisely as it must. This is when the universe answers, not with thunder, not with miracles that defy logic, but with a quiet reordering of your world. The people who no longer serve your growth drift away. The paths that were blocked begin to clear. What belongs to you begins to find you without effort. Letting go is the bridge between resistance and revelation. It is not a single act, but a state of consciousness, a way of being that says, I trust the flow of life more than I trust my fear. And in that trust, the universe always responds in kind. It brings to your life what resonates with your peace, not your desperation. It gives shape to your inner harmony, reflecting it back in the form of outer balance. The truth is, when you let go, you do not lose. You return. You return to the natural rhythm of existence, where everything you need arrives in its own time, and everything that no longer serves quietly fades away. The universe has always been responding to you. It always will. But it waits for one sacred act, the moment you decide to let go. The weight of attachment. Every human being carries within themselves a hidden gravity, a weight formed by the things they cling to. These attachments are not always material. Often they are invisible, woven into the fabric of our desires, fears, and memories. We hold on to ideas about who we should be, how life should unfold, and what happiness must look like. In doing so, we create a cage within the psyche, mistaking the bars for safety. Yet, beneath the surface, this attachment begins to suffocate the soul. It limits growth, distorts clarity, and blinds us to the natural rhythm of existence. When you hold on too tightly to something, you stop seeing it for what it truly is. It becomes an object of possession rather than a living part of your journey. You begin to grasp, to control, to manipulate, believing that through ownership you can preserve meaning. But the paradox is that the more you try to hold on, the more life slips through your fingers, for life was never meant to be contained. The human mind fears loss above all else. It clings because it is terrified of emptiness. It believes that letting go means falling into nothingness. But that emptiness it fears is not void. It is space, potential, the field in which new life grows. Still, the mind resists. It identifies with attachments, saying, "This is mine. This defines me. Without it, I am nothing." And so the ego builds its fortress upon fragile foundations. It attaches to success, to relationships, to status, to beliefs, and even to pain. The individual becomes a prisoner of their own clinging, unable to breathe freely within the present moment. Attachment is not love. It is fear disguised as devotion. True love allows freedom. It flows without ownership, but attachment demands control. It traps what it desires most. The deeper tragedy is that many believe attachment is proof of care, when in truth it is often a resistance to change. So to be attached is to live in a state of constant tension, for everything that exists is impermanent. The universe moves in cycles of birth and decay, creation and dissolution. To attach yourself to any form is to stand in defiance of this eternal rhythm. You suffer not because life takes things away, but because you believed they were yours to keep. The unconscious mind holds these attachments like anchors. They pull you back whenever you try to move forward. A person may say they wish to grow, to evolve, to find peace, but growth requires release. You cannot fill your hands with the new while they remain clenched around the old. The moment you start to observe your attachments without judgment, you begin to see how deeply they control your emotions. Every disappointment, every burst of anger, every lingering sadness can often be traced to something you refuse to let go of. This awareness is painful, yet it is the first step toward liberation. There is an ancient wisdom that whispers through life's quiet moments. The more you hold on, anxiety gives way to clarity. You begin to notice that the events of your life are not isolated incidents, but interconnected movements within a larger pattern. This insight cannot be forced. It arises naturally when the inner struggle ceases. The paradox reveals itself. When you stop trying to force life to happen your way, life begins to unfold in harmony with your true nature. What once seemed like random chaos begins to display rhythm and meaning. You realize that what was meant for you was never beyond your reach. It was merely waiting for your resistance to end. The act of surrender does not mean inaction. It means acting without attachment to the result. It means participating fully in life while trusting the greater intelligence that guides it. To surrender is to dance with existence, allowing it to lead while you move in rhythm. The mind, however, does not easily accept this dance. It demands guarantees, outcomes, and certainty. But surrender requires faith, not blind belief, but an intuitive trust that the universe operates with purpose even when that purpose is hidden from view. When you surrender, you begin to live from that trust. You no longer react to life's uncertainties with fear, but with quiet curiosity. Each challenge becomes an invitation to deepen your faith in the unseen order that governs all things. The greatest transformations often occur in the moments when you have no choice but to surrender. When every plan fails, when every effort collapses, when the path ahead is shrouded in uncertainty, these are the moments when surrender is no longer a choice, but a necessity. And in that forced letting go, many discover a peace they had never known before. It is as though life was waiting for you to exhaust your need for control before revealing its grace. What you once viewed as failure begins to look like divine redirection. What you once feared losing, becomes the very thing that frees you. To surrender is to acknowledge that the same intelligence that moves the stars and the tides also moves through you. You are not separate from life, but an expression of it. When you surrender, you align with that truth. You stop fighting the flow of becoming and instead allow yourself to be carried by it. This alignment is the secret doorway through which meaning, synchronicity, and peace enter your life. It is not resignation. It is participation without resistance. It is a conscious choice to trust that the unfolding of events, even those that bring pain, is not without purpose. Through surrender, you discover that the universe does not conspire against you. It collaborates with your innermost truth, waiting only for you to step aside, and synchronicity and the flow of life. There is a language spoken by the universe that does not use words, a silent communication that reveals itself through signs, timing, and patterns that seem too precise to be coincidences. When a person begins to let go of control and aligns their inner state with acceptance, this language becomes clearer. What once appeared random begins to feel connected. Encounters happen at just the right moment, opportunities appear when they are most needed, and even difficulties seem to carry a subtle message. This mysterious order is not the product of logic or reason. It is the reflection of harmony between the inner world and the outer world. When you change internally, life begins to rearrange itself externally. This phenomenon is what many call synchronicity, the moment when the invisible correspondence between your inner truth and outer events becomes visible. Synchronicity arises when the unconscious and the external world move in rhythm. It cannot be summoned by force. It emerges when you are in flow with life rather than in resistance to it. The moment you begin to trust the process, the universe starts to mirror that trust back to you. It may come in the form of a chance meeting that alters your direction, a word overheard at the perfect moment, or a door opening just when you thought all doors were closed. These are not mere accidents. They are expressions of an underlying order that connects all things. The more conscious you become, the more you begin to recognize these threads of meaning weaving through your daily experience. What others might dismiss as coincidence feels to you like confirmation, a whisper from existence that you are walking the path meant for you. To perceive synchronicity, you must learn to slow down the restless activity of the mind. The mind seeks control. It demands explanations and proof. But synchronicity does not reveal itself through analysis. It reveals itself through awareness. It is subtle, gentle, and deeply intimate. It speaks to the part of you that is beyond intellect, the intuitive, timeless aspect of being that senses truth without needing to define it. When you quiet the noise of thought and simply observe, you start to see the rhythm of your life unfolding like a piece of music. Every event, pleasant or painful, becomes a note in that larger composition. The harmony was always there. You were simply too distracted to hear it. There is an inner order that governs the external one. When you are in inner conflict, filled with fear, resistance, or attachment, the flow of life seems blocked. Obstacles multiply, timing feels wrong, and nothing aligns. But when you return to a state of acceptance, when you release the need to force outcomes, the current of life begins to move again. You do not need to chase. What is meant for you finds its way. This is the natural Reiki rhythm of the universe, one that favors openness over control. The more aligned you are internally, the more effortless your external world becomes. The flow is not something you create, it is something you remember, something that was always there beneath the surface of your striving. Synchronicity is also a mirror of consciousness. Life reflects to you the frequency at which you exist. If you dwell in fear, you attract confusion. If you live in clarity, life becomes clear. It is as though the universe listens not to your words, but to your state of being. When you dwell in acceptance, the universe mirrors that acceptance by aligning circumstances with your peace. This is not mystical thinking. It is the natural correspondence between the inner and outer dimensions of existence. What you nurture within yourself becomes the pattern that shapes your external experience. In the flow of synchronicity, time itself begins to feel different. You no longer measure life by schedules and deadlines, but by alignment and intuition. The right things come at the right time because you are attuned to the rhythm that guides them. The need to rush fades away. You begin to trust that what must arrive, and what must end will end. There is no more anxiety about the future because you are anchored in the present, and in that presence, life takes on a luminous quality. Every moment feels alive with meaning, even the simplest ones. A conversation, a glance, a coincidence, all become threads of the same sacred pattern. When you live in harmony with this, the rebirth of the self. There comes a point in the process of letting go when the old self begins to crumble and something entirely new starts to take form. It is not a sudden transformation but a gradual awakening, a quiet unfolding that occurs when the illusions of control, identity, and possession begin to dissolve. This dissolution can feel like death because, in a way, it is. The person you believed yourself to be, the one shaped by fear, desire, and social expectation, must die so that something deeper, more authentic, can emerge. This is the rebirth of the self, not as a concept or an improvement of the old, but as a return to what has always been beneath the surface. It is the unveiling of the essential being that was hidden behind masks of adaptation and survival. When you begin to let go of what no longer serves you, the structures that held your false identity start to break apart. You may experience confusion, emptiness, or a loss of direction. The ego calls this destruction. The soul calls it renewal. The self that you have identified with, your roles, your stories, your attachments, cannot survive the light of awareness. Every layer that was built to protect the ego begins to peel away. What remains is something raw, yet free, fragile, yet powerful. It is the essence of who you truly are, unconditioned by fear or the need for validation. This inner rebirth is not the result of effort, but of surrender. It occurs naturally once you stop resisting the cycles of change that life presents. In this state of renewal, the self no longer clings to the external world for definition. The constant need to prove, to achieve, or to compare fades. Instead, there emerges a deep sense of stillness, a quiet recognition that being itself is enough. You begin to perceive life not as a battlefield to conquer, but as a mirror through which your inner state is reflected. Soudain, diaries that once separated you from the world begin to blur. You sense a subtle unity between yourself and everything that exists, the sky, the earth, the people around you. This realization is not intellectual, it is felt. It moves through your entire being like a truth remembered, not newly discovered. As the old self dissolves, many experience a period of uncertainty, even fear, for the ground beneath them seems to vanish. The familiar reference points disappear, and the identity that once provided meaning no longer holds power. This in-between space is sacred. It is the womb of transformation. It is here that you learn to exist without clinging, to be without defining. In this emptiness, the new self begins to emerge. Not a self that needs to control or possess, but one that simply observes, participates, and flows with the rhythm of life. This new consciousness is rooted not in ego, but in awareness. It does not demand recognition because it has found peace in its own being. Rebirth is rarely gentle. It tears away illusions, exposes hidden fears, and confronts you with your own shadow. Yet through this confrontation comes purification. The pain you once resisted becomes the fire that refines you. You begin to see that what you called suffering was often the universe's way of freeing you from what you were never meant to be. The identity that crumbles in the process of letting go was never truly yours. It was borrowed from experience, shaped by conditioning, sustained by fear. When it falls away, you are left not with nothingness but with truth, with presence, with a clarity that cannot be shaken by circumstance. This rebirth brings with it a new way of seeing the world. You no longer chase meaning outside yourself because you have discovered it within. Life ceases to be a series of disconnected events and becomes a continuous movement of consciousness, expressing itself through form. The people you encounter, the challenges you face, the moments of joy and sorrow all appear as reflections of the inner landscape. You begin to move through life with a sense of grace, not because everything becomes easy, but because you no longer resist what is. The reborn self lives in harmony with the flow of existence. It does not seek to dominate or to hide. It simply allows life to unfold through it. In this state, purpose is no longer something to be found, but something to be lived. You do not need to search for it because you become it. Your actions, your words, your silence, all begin to carry the fragrance of authenticity. This is the quiet revolution of the soul, the transformation that occurs when the false falls away and the real steps forward. It is not the creation of a new identity, but the remembrance of what has always been waiting beneath the noise of the mind, the return of consciousness to its natural state of unity with all things, the universe's silent answer. When you finally let go, truly, not in words but in the quiet depths of your being, something shifts in the fabric of existence. The change is not loud, not dramatic, but deeply real. It is as if life exhales with you, as if the universe itself had been waiting for that very moment of release. For so long, you have spoken to life through your desires, your fears, your resistance, demanding outcomes, asking for signs, pleading for direction. But the universe does not respond to words. It responds to energy. When you let go, your energy changes. It becomes still, unclenched, receptive. That is when the universe begins to speak, not through miracles that defy nature, but through the subtle reordering of your reality. The universe answers in silence, through shifts that cannot be measured by the senses, but can be felt by the soul. It does not shout its guidance. It whispers through circumstances, through timing, through the quiet unfolding of events that seem, at first, ordinary. When you are no longer clouded by the noise of control, you begin to notice this silent language. A phone call comes just when you are about to give up. A chance encounter leads to the opportunity you needed. The right words reach your ears when you least expect them. These are not coincidences. They are responses, confirmations from a greater intelligence that moves beneath the surface of all things. This communication has always been happening, but when you cling, you cannot hear it. Attachment creates interference. It fills your mind with static, with endless mental noise. The more you force life to answer in the way you expect, the more you block the answer that is already coming. The universe responds not to the voice that commands, but to the heart that listens. The moment you surrender the need to dictate how life should unfold, the conversation becomes clear. You begin to see meaning in everything, not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. Letting go is not about losing control. It is about opening your awareness to the intelligence that has always been guiding you. There is a profound stillness that follows true release. It feels like standing at the edge of an ocean, watching the waves move with perfect rhythm, realizing that you are part of that rhythm. In this silence, you understand that the universe was never against you. Every delay, every detour, every heartbreak was a form of communication, a message saying, not this way, not yet. The universe's silence is not indifference. It is guidance in its purest form. It allows you the freedom to discover wisdom through experience, to grow through surrender, to see through illusion. The silence is the teacher that waits until you are ready to hear without fear. When you finally trust this silence, life begins to move differently around you. What once required effort begins to flow naturally. The people who belong in your life start to appear with ease, and those who no longer align with your growth quietly drift away. You do not have to chase what is meant for you. It finds you in the space that letting go creates. This is the universe's way of answering, not through possession, but through alignment. The moment your inner world aligns with acceptance, the outer world reshapes itself to match that harmony. This is not magic, though it feels like it. It is the law of resonance, the mirror effect of consciousness. The most beautiful truth in this process is that the universe does not need to be convinced to bless you. It is not withholding anything. It is always ready to respond, but it waits for your vibration to match what you seek. Letting go raises that vibration. It tells life, I trust you. And in that trust, doors open that were invisible before. The right opportunities begin to appear not because you forced them, but because you became ready for them. Life begins to cooperate with your authenticity rather than your anxiety. The universe answers in balance, not in chaos. It rearranges your path with precision once you stop obstructing it with resistance. The losses that once haunts it broke, you begin to make sense. You see how they cleared space for what was truly meant to arrive. The confusion that haunted you transforms into understanding. Even the moments of pain reveal their purpose in hindsight, showing how they shaped the strength and awareness you now possess. This is how the universe responds, not in thunder, but in quiet coherence. It speaks through alignment, through synchronicity, through peace that emerges for no apparent reason. When you decide to let go, the answer comes not as an event but as a state of being, a deep inner knowing that you are exactly where you are meant to be and that life in its vast intelligence has always been listening. Conclusion. When you trace the journey from attachment to surrender, from resistance to flow, you begin to see that letting go is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything. It is the quiet revolution of the soul, the moment when the self ceases to fight against life and begins to move in harmony with it. The weight you once carried, your fears, your expectations, your need to control, was never meant to define you. It was only meant to teach you. Every attachment was a mirror showing you where you had mistaken possession for love, where you had confused control with safety, where you had forgotten the quiet intelligence that moves through all creation. To let go is to return to that intelligence. It is to trust the unseen rhythm that orchestrates every detail of existence. In surrender, you stop asking the universe to bend to your will and begin to align your will with the universe. You discover that peace was never something to be achieved. It was something that emerges when you no longer resist what is. The moment you allow life to unfold without grasping, a deeper order reveals itself. Synchronicities multiply, connections form effortlessly, and what once seemed lost begins to find its way back in new and unexpected forms. In this state of alignment, you realize that the universe has always been responding. Not to your words, not to your demands, but to your state of being. When your heart is open and your spirit unbound, life reflects that freedom back to you. The right paths open, the right people arrive, and the right lessons unfold. The chaos that once seemed senseless begins to make sense, not because life changed, but because your perception did. You have stepped out of the storm and into the stillness from which the storm was born. Letting go, then, is not about losing, it is about remembering that you were never separate from a flow you feared to trust, that the universe was never your adversary, but your mirror. Every fall, every ending, every silence was a response guiding you toward truth. When you release the need to hold on, the universe does not take from you. It gives. It gives clarity in place of confusion, peace in place of tension, and wisdom in place of fear. In the quiet after surrender, you feel it, the presence of something greater, vast and tender, moving with you, within you, as you. You understand that the universe's response was never delayed, it was always waiting for your stillness. And now, in that stillness, you finally hear the answer that was there all along, that you were never meant to control the flow of life, only to trust it, and in that trust, to become one with it.